fight, climb, and ride up a river to save the world, I think. In Riverbond, do an eggplant and a watermelon make a good team? Riverbond uses voxels to create colorful and varied environments and populate them with unique enemies. The style lends itself to satisfying gameplay, as structures collapse comically at the swing of a sword, and enemies tend to explode into showers of cubes. There's a surprising aesthetic variety in weapons, enemies, and playable characters, although the levels are limited in surface area, giving the sense that each is an unconnected floating island. They're still fun to explore, with a small number of secrets to discover, and they lack the overwhelming scope of larger sandboxes.
Riverbond is a very basic hack and slash with occasional platforming and exploration elements, where 9 seemingly unrelated worlds are broken up into a handful of disconnected stages. In most stages, you're given a mundane task like find a key or find 6 scrolls. These tasks are completed by locating the objects spread across the floating island that represents the current stage, and simply holding a button once you've found them. When you've found everything, you enter a giant portal and move on to the next stage. There's almost no challenge in performing the requested task, other than occasionally having to search a bit harder, or having to fight off enemies while you do it. Combat is a significant part of the game, but don't expect too much depth. Enemies perform admirably as obstacles, and usually take quite a few hits to defeat, but the game's idea of a challenge is to simply throw more enemies at you. Enemies come in 3 flavors: ranged, melee, and big, or a combination of these. Any enemy can easily take you out with a few hits, especially when you're swarmed from all sides. Ranged enemies are especially annoying as they attack with multiple projectiles at a time that can be hard to dodge. There's one segment with turrets that barely ever let up enough for you to attack them. Each level provides multiple aesthetically unique weapons that you can find in chests as you explore. All of them are fun to use, but you'll find which category of weapon you like most based on damage per second and how fun the attack animation is to watch. Larger weapons do more single-hit damage, but faster weapons are almost always better. Ranged weapons are more rare, and there's even less variety in how they function. Aiming never feels precise, and projectiles are quite slow. Reloading requires that you use all of your ammo before starting a short cooldown phase. Ranged attacks feel necessary with larger enemies and bosses, where it's generally dangerous to get too close.
Combat is fast and fun in short bursts, as you roll around enemies hacking your way to your next goal. But as more enemies enter the fight, the pace of the fighting slows down while you take damage from all sides, and hope you can take out an enemy before you lose all your health. Some fighting areas are quite cramped, especially in co-op where you can't get too far from your partner, reducing your mobility. The final level of each stage is a boss that looks menacing and takes significantly more damage to defeat, but otherwise isn't really that different from other combat encounters. Exploration is the other major part of the game. There's a cool sense of discovery when platforming to narrow ledges, because oftentimes it felt like we were going out of bounds, but more often than not, we were treated to a chest or a collectible coin, signaling that the level design is usually intentional. Sometimes there are even entire secret rooms cleverly hidden in the levels. There's good variety in level layouts, and good use of verticality, that make each new area fun to explore, and the small environments mean no area feels overwhelming. Although the world isn't cohesive, and the gameplay lacks variety or challenge, the simplicity makes the game accessible to players of any skill level. Riverbond is an admittedly simple game, and could verge on boring if played solo, with a lack of story or sense of progression. It really benefits from the social aspect of co-op. With a friend, finding a path to a secret room is a celebration, and landing that last blow that destroys a giant monster is a shared triumph. You can point out when you recognize the most recently unlocked character from another game, and you can debate the merits of your limited inventory of weapons whenever you find a new one. Co-op doesn't make Riverbond a better game, but it makes playing the game more fun. Despite that, there are familiar limitations that co-op forces on the gameplay. Players share a screen, and attempting to move in opposite directions will have one player teleporting to the location of the other. Because players can't move too far from each other, platforming is a bit more difficult, as one player falling could require the other player to backtrack, so the fallen player can catch up. Players are able to revive each other, but it's difficult if the other player was down during a fight. Without reviving, the down player has to wait around 15 seconds to respawn, which can feel like a long time.
Other than combat, nothing is made any easier by having a co-op partner. Tasks are usually far enough away from each other that players can't split up to accomplish them, and none of them require or encourage teamwork. Sometimes, even combat encounters are made more difficult in co-op, as players can be pulled apart by a distant respawn point, leaving one player across the screen, barely able to see the enemies they're fighting. Fortunately, the game is easy enough that the complications of co-op are only minor obstacles, and overall, we'd much prefer playing the game with a friend. The length of the stages varied quite a bit, but none of them took longer than an hour, so the game is good for short sessions.
Riverbond is about a fantasy world where the lands are connected by a river. You'd be forgiven for thinking there wasn't much story in the game, and you might even be right. Every level has NPCs to talk to that give a bit of context to your goals for the level, and they offer some vague details of lore for the current stage. There's at least one NPC, Bomb Girl, that shows up consistently to make a quick joke about violence solving all problems. The game could do a better job at spreading the narrative out between levels, as you really only start to get a vague understanding once you get to the final level. As it stands, the separate levels feel very separate, and except for the interesting boss designs displayed on the mission select screen, there's not much to motivate you to continue to the next level. We experience no glitches, crashes, or technical issues of any kind.
There's little remarkable about Riverbond, but the lack of complexity is made up for in style and charm, and we were happy to boot it up at the end of the day for some simple fun. We came for the cool-looking voxel environments and creatures, and stayed to watch them spectacularly fall apart. It's definitely too easy to stay interesting for longer sessions or single player, but we had a great time exploring each of the levels and unlocking characters to use in future levels. If you're interested in a simple hack and slash with a great graphical style and an emphasis on exploration, and you know someone who's willing to play it with you, this is one we'd recommend.